Welcome back. How you guys been? Today we're going over MCDP-7 Chapter 3. Chapter 3 focuses on the learning environment. This environment is made for you in order to figure out how to be successful, how to generate ideas, learning how to utilize the tools and the skills you've learned. As well as a place where you can sit down, learn, train, and educate yourself on the things that you need to, take up one more level. The main purpose of this learning environment is to make sure you are capable to succeed. That's it. Now, when going over this chapter, it mainly focuses on like an institution, a place where you can go and learn yourself, and that's good for the people who can do that. You can perhaps go to the library, though it's not really, that's a place where you learn. You can go to school, that's a learning institution, college, another learning institution. But we're really going to try to focus on how you can do it as an individual and how this can benefit you, benefit all of us. So this chapter breaks it down into 6 steps. The first step being, so step number 1, adapt your learning environment to you. What does this mean? Ideally, your learning environment would be specifically tailored for you, right? Everyone is different, so they have different nicks and kicks that will only suit them, right? What's beneficial for one person might not be beneficial for another. So figuring out what works for you is what you want to focus on when creating your own learning environment. You want to understand your needs as well as your interests and abilities in order to properly challenge you. A great benefit of creating a learning environment that's just for you is that you can focus solely on yourself and you can work at your own pace. Now, what does this look like? For many of us, we don't have access all the time to go out there and pay money to put ourselves in a spot like that. So we make it ourselves. Well, at the most basic level, you need a pen, a writing utensil, and a piece of paper. Secondly, you're going to want to have access to internet so you can look things up or have a book, right? Thirdly, figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. If you learn by doing, try to create an environment where you are physically doing what you want to learn. If you learn it by seeing and maybe even hearing someone talk to you, then perhaps you can look up a video online. Though people with a book without internet access, that probably it can become troublesome. Thirdly, you're just going to want to go in, take notes, figure out the important steps, what's important, what's not important, write them down, learn them, practice them, reiterate them, tell them to other people, But it really depends on what you're trying to do. So for example, let's say you're trying to learn how to tie a tie, right? So maybe there's a book you can read on tying ties, or maybe simply look up a YouTube video, right? So now you're sitting in your corner, you're on your chair, you have your tie, and if you're reading, you write down the important steps, right? And if you're watching the YouTube video, then you learn by looking at them and you copy them, right? And you don't leave that spot until you get it done, right? Then afterwards, you can have the option of going back in and getting it done quicker, better, not having to look at the video. It's all about how far you want to take it. But the point is to create a spot where you can do exactly what you want to do in your own time based on how you want to do it. Right? So now that you have your own spot, now we take it to, well, what's the objective? What's the main goal? Right? And that's step 2. What is your objective? Well, going back to the example of tying a tie, the objective would be to learn how to tie a tie. Maybe at the base level. Eventually, you could take it to learn how to tie a tie in 10 seconds. Learn how to tie a tie with a certain kind of knot. Maybe learn how to tie a bow tie. Whatever works for you. But the point is that now that you have your spot, figure out what you're going to do. What are you learning? What's the goal? Right? Because the only way you can utilize that spot is if you have an objective, if you have something that you're trying to learn. So you figure that out. That's your second step. And when you figure that out, you're good. Now, most of the time when you're learning things, it's because it's a weak area of yours, right? There are people who decide to practice their strengths, right? It's your responsibility to make sure that your strengths continue to be your strengths while bringing up your weaknesses, right? So a nice thing to do is tailoring your objective with either a weakness or strength that you have. That way you're constantly improving what you already know you're good at and what you know you're not good at. Most of the time, your weak points are where you lack knowledge or expertise in. So it's easy to figure out weak points. But something that you might want to do prior to creating an objective is figuring out for yourself, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what do I want to work on, what don't I have to work on. You know, this brings us to the third step, which is setting a learning expectation. Well, what is a learning expectation? It's something you expect to get out of your learning through your educating yourself. What do you expect? What do you no matter what happens, what do you desire to get out of this? So for an example, you created your spot and you got your objective. Well, maybe one thing you can do is say, okay, my learning expectation is to learn one new thing every time I sit down and I'm in here every time, right? So one example could be every time I sit down and try to learn something, I make sure I learn at least one thing. Another learning expectation could be, okay, I have this environment, let me utilize it once a day, right? The purpose of this is to frame your mindset, right? You want to, the better you can hone down on something, right? The better you'll be. So for example, I want you to picture arrows pointing in all different directions, with one arrow pointing in the direction you want to go. The more you are able to remove all the other arrows and focus on just the one arrow you want to go, the better you'll be in your chances of succeeding, right? These arrows represent where all your attention is going. They're distractions. Eliminate your distractions, set your mindset right, and just be like a sniper. Just snipe right through exactly what you want to accomplish, right? So that's step 3. Step 3 is setting a learning expectation. The fourth step was labeled as learn, practice, and repeat. So bringing it all together, right? You have your environment, you have your objective, and you have your expectation. Well, now you have everything you need to move forward and meet them, meet your expectation and meet your objective, right? So what's the first thing you do? Well, you have to learn. You have to sit there, take notes, or sit there and watch and figure out, okay, this is what it needs to look like when I'm done, or this is how one gets that thing done. But now it comes time to move to the second thing, which would be to practice, right? So you've learned it and now you're practicing. And at first, it'll be a little difficult, but as you do it more, guess what happens? You get better at it, right? Going back to the tie example, you're learning how to tie a tie. Maybe the first time around you messed up, so you start all over. Maybe that happens 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. But eventually you get to a point where you get each step right and you get a knot. Now it might not be the best looking knot, but you sure as hell did tie that tie. So how do you bring it now to where every time you tie a tie, you know exactly what you're doing, you make no mistakes, and people come to you to say, hey, can you tie this tie for me? Well, that's the repetition, right? So you learn, you practice, and you repeat. You can't become the best at one thing without repeating what you've learned. You continue to practice it, right? They say the journey of mastery is not a destination. It's constant. There's always something more to learn. There's always something more to improve. So just keep practicing, keep repeating, and eventually the thing you wanted to learn will get done. So this brings us to our fifth step, assessments. So what do we mean by assessments? Well, basically, when it comes to yourself, it might not be necessary. But most of the time, when you're going out into the real world and you're learning how to do something, right? Let's say you're hired at a job and they need to make sure that you know how to design something, right? Well, first, they'll offer you training. But before they offer you training, they might want to see where you land already, right? Not everyone that they hire will be a beginner, or not everyone that they hire will be an expert. So they figure out where you are so they can better suit your needs in training you, right? So in this chapter, it talked about 3 different assessments. So the first assessment was labeled as a diagnostic assessment. This assessment is used to understand your current level of skill and education. The second one is called a formative assessment. This one assesses you on your strengths and your weaknesses. The last assessment they talked about was a summative assessment. This basically determines if you met the objective, if you've learned what you're supposed to learn. Now, it's up to you if you want to use this to assess yourself, but it's quite possible to do so, depending on how you feel about it and depending on how serious it is. With tying a tie, might not be necessary, right? You could probably do things like that right off the bat. Like, first, okay, I don't know how to tie a tie. So there goes your diagnostic assessment. Your second might be, I've used ropes, so I'm used to doing knots, but I've never actually practiced tying a tie. So maybe you could say that's a strength. You have a strength in creating knots, but your weakness is in you don't know how to do it with a tie. Okay. The last assessment would be, well, I've learned how to tie a tie, so I'm good. Assessments are there to help you more than they are to learn, right? Assessments give you feedback. It helps you figuring out where you stand. The last and final step they talked about was having a mentor. Now, having a mentor is very important, but not everyone is able to get one. And most of the time, mentors pick you. A mentor will help keep you on your path, as well as guide you with their wisdom and knowledge and expertise that they've already learned, right? A good mentor is knowledgeable and competent in the area that you're seeking help. As well as they get to know you better, they'll figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are. Ideally, they'll have a lot to go off of based on what they've been through, and they can teach you what they've learned, the mistakes they've made, and why they're important. So when you go about doing your business, you have some knowledge in the back of your head and you know what to do. At the very least, you have a better time going about what you have to do. You're not stuck. So those are the 6 steps. Ultimately, the 6 steps were created and implemented in order to help a student learn, right? And a student is everybody. Everyone can be a student. And so when you're out in the world and you're trying to learn something new, try to utilize these 6 steps, right? They're very important. Take a space and dedicate that space to helping you accomplish something, helping you learn something. It's like having an office, right? Or, sometimes you don't have space for an office. So maybe you get the next best thing, a table and a chair, right? That's all you need. Now sit down and get an objective. What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to learn? What are your expectations, right? Once you have those down, now you can proceed to the 4th step and learning it, practicing it, and repeating it until you get it to a point where you are comfortable with your ability, right? Now, if you want to, you can include some assessments, but it's not needed. And lastly, if you can, try to find a mentor. Now, a lot of the times, a mentor doesn't have to be someone who's doing a one-on-one with you, right? There are plenty of people out there nowadays on social media who are able to be a mentor towards you without physically being there, right? So for example, if you wanted to play basketball, there are coaches on YouTube who will assist you and show you how to hold the ball, how to dribble the ball, how to shoot the ball, right? These are things that you would learn on your own, but now you have an additional resource, right? So those are just some things to think about when you're trying to learn and accomplish something new. In the chapter, they also talked about 2 very important skills that I think we can all benefit from. The first skill is mental imagery. Basically, mental imagery is you visualizing a certain process in your head. Now, why do you do this? You want to do this because it helps build confidence. It helps prepare you for the real thing. And when you are doing it, it reduces your anxiety and the chance of surprise. In order to just picture something in your head, right, you close your eyes. Let's say you're picturing how to tie a tie. Say, okay, I have my tie. It's around my neck, right? Okay, now put this side over this side. Okay, now put it through, right? And so on and so forth. You mentally visualize it so that you know what to expect. You gain confidence and you reduce any surprises, anything that you wouldn't expect to appear there. It's a very good skill to have, and I advise you guys to practice it. The second skill is self reflection. Now, why would you want to do that? Self reflection is important because when you self reflect, you're asking yourself questions, right? You learn things when you ask yourself questions because why? You give them answers or you find answers for them. It betters your understanding of what you believe in and what you expect, what your strengths and weaknesses. It better assists you in figuring out where you want to maneuver, where do you want to go, right? It helps you figure out what you accept, what you tolerate, what you don't tolerate, your standards. And when you're self reflecting on a certain topic, it brings greater understanding as a whole on that topic, right? So, those are the key things that I wanted to discuss today, the 6 steps to assist you in learning, as well as the 2 new skills, self reflection and mental imagery. Now, if you appreciate this video, I'll appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Please comment down below any questions or concerns you may have. I'd love to interact with you. And stay tuned for my next video coming on Monday. Take care.